Just over 3 years ago, I had to switch from playing right-handed to playing left-handed because I injured myself in a mountain bike race. Now, initially I set myself the goal of trying to become a 4.0 player and win a 4.0 tournament with my left hand. And I started out entering a couple of tournaments, but then I very quickly realized that winning tournaments at that level wasn't really important to me. What I want to be able to do is play tennis like I used to be able to play. Now, I wasn't an amazing player right-handed growing up. It took me a long time to get good. It wasn't until I learned about using brain-based training to improve vision and coordination that I was able to actually become a good player. But with my left hand, my goal is to get back to that point. I've made videos talking about hopefully becoming a 5.0 player, but I don't really care about the number. It's about having the confidence, it's about being able to execute all the different shots that I want to and being able to enjoy competing. So that's what I've been working on for the last few years. I basically haven't played a full set of tennis with my left hand in pretty much 3 years. I've focused on developing my ground strokes and my volleys. My one-handed backhand, that came very quickly. The slice backhand came very quickly and very easily to me, and they're at a pretty good level, but the forehand was the sticking point. The forehand timing is so different to a one-handed backhand with my right hand. It's taken me a long time to be able to time driving through my left hip, but I'm finally at the point where I can do it. Now, I made a video about 9 months ago saying I thought I was finally at the point, but I wasn't. Now I'm definitely at the point where I can play a proper left-handed forehand. I can attack, I can defend, I can vary the spins, I can do what I need to do. So now it's finally time to work on my serve. It is by far the weakest area of my game. I do want to get back to playing tournaments, but I want to get back to playing tournaments on my own terms, and serving is the next thing. So in this video, I'm going to show you where my serve is currently at. I've done a little bit of work on it, but it is it's far from being a finished product. So I'm going to explain kind of where I'm at the moment, show you comparisons to me and some pro tennis players, and kind of identify what it is that I need to work on next to move my serve forwards and hopefully be able to compete properly maybe in a few months. Okay, hopefully you find the video helpful. If you do, it'd be great if you give me a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed to my channel before, it's much appreciated if you could do that as well. Let's take a look at a few serves at regular speed, and then I will slow things down and explain what I need to work on. Actually, 2 things I need to work on. The first thing I need to work on is filming myself serving, because I put the camera way too close, so I'll fix that one moving forwards. But I'll look at what I need to do technically. Now, the reason I haven't spent much time working on my serve is twofold. Firstly, it takes time. I only get so much time on the practice court, and I've just focused on the other strokes so I could at least enjoy rallying and playing points that way. And then secondly, body management. Learning to play tennis left-handed, you find out how much stress it puts, especially on your shoulder and wrist. So I physically haven't been able to do as much practice as I would like to because it's taken me a while to get my wrist and shoulder feeling strong and stable. But now I'm working on things. Let's take a look. I've obviously done a little bit of work. It was really difficult first kind of getting used to the loading position, just doing things the opposite way around. I found it really tricky to be balanced, so I was collapsing in the loading position when I first started. So I've mostly kind of worked on just trying to get the ball toss a little bit more consistent and trying to get this loaded position and keep my arm up without collapsing too soon, and then just trying to get used to timing the racket drop. So that's kind of what I've been working on so far, but now let's take a look at things in more detail. But before I do that, I want to quickly let you know about a free live Neuro Tennis Challenge that I'm holding pretty soon. In this free live event, I'm going to be teaching you how you can use brain-based training to improve your hand-to-eye coordination to help you become a more skillful tennis player, because once you're a more skillful tennis player, it allows you to play higher level tennis. So if you would like to learn how to improve your hand-to-eye coordination for free, I'll place a link to it down in the description. Click on that link, it'll take you over to a page where you can register. So if we slow things down and take a look, we'll see that there are some things that I'm doing quite well and a number of things that I need to improve on. But as with all things that you're trying to improve, you can't do everything all at once. You have to choose and fix underlying problems first and then move on to the next thing once you've fixed the underlying problem. And just like with all of the strokes, the preparation is the important part. Here, the preparation is the loading position. It's the position that you get into just before you start the racket drop and before you start trying to drive up and accelerate into the ball. And just like your forehand and backhand, if you don't get good preparation, you'll never have a truly good forehand and backhand. It's exactly the same here. So the way that you start is really important, and that's what I've been focusing on up until now. The ball toss I found really difficult initially, but now it's pretty good. I'm releasing the ball at around eye line. My arm is staying straight there, so that's pretty nice. This is where things are getting tricky. It's taken me a long time to be able to hold my arm up. Initially, that was collapsing. The actual positioning of the ball toss is getting better, although that's always going to be a work in progress. Now, my shoulder alignment is pretty good. We often want to see a good alignment between the upper body there and the shoulder, so that's pretty good. The racket position, it's okay. What we're going to see from some of the pros in a moment is their angle is more like that. Mine's maybe pointing up a little bit too much, but it's not necessarily wrong. Where things are going wrong for me is I'm maybe over-rotating my upper body a little bit too much. Again, in theory, you could make it work. John McEnroe can make it work. Ben Sheldon can make it work. But surprise, surprise, I am not as skillful as them and my timing isn't as good, so I can't make it work like this. And then also what's going on with my lower body. This is kind of the main problem for me. I'm kind of over rotating my hips. Now, it's not something that I'm doing initially. I actually start out in a reasonable position. So I start out pretty well. My feet are kind of pointing in a decent direction, but notice what happens to my left leg. So my left leg really externally rotates here. And this is partly a flexibility range of motion thing, and it's partly a technical thing. But now my leg is externally rotated. And because my leg is already in external rotation, it means that when I try and drive up into the ball, I can't throw this hip forwards as much as I need to, and I can't drive up as much as I need to. So I need to work on trying to keep my foot in a better position so that then I can drive up into the ball. Because what we're going to see is I lose out on plenty of power because I'm not getting a good leg drive and I'm not timing the racket drop as optimally as I could. So I could go, yes, I need to focus on the way that I do this racket drop and the acceleration and up into the contact point, but I have to get the loaded position first. So now let's take a look at me compared to a couple of pros. And obviously when we do this, we have to be a little bit careful. I'm about to compare myself to the #1 player in the world who's won 2 Grand Slams this year. So obviously I don't have the same degree of skill and ability and movement as Jannik Sinner. But there are certain things that we can kind of take note of, and we can use it to help kind of guide us. Now, the video I'm using is from Slow Mo Tennis. Fantastic resource. I'll place a link to it down in the description. But what I want you to notice, firstly, the starting position, fairly similar. The way and the timing of him taking his racket up, that's a preference thing. It doesn't matter as much. If we go into there, that's in his loaded position. So we're going to see the first thing that's really different is that arm position that I've just talked about. So my racket is pointing up, his is pointing more there, and that means that as he drives up into the ball, he's going to be able to get more external rotation of the shoulder, or a faster external rotation, which if you can get the timing, it's going to potentially lead to more racket head speed. So that's the first thing that we've got. What I want you to notice though, look where my back foot isn't pointing. So my back foot has rotated out this way. His is pointing in this direction. He's maybe got slightly more knee bend than me, which you would expect that. He's younger and more athletic, but my knee bend is okay. But what I also want you to notice is his upper body is pointing more towards the side. It's maybe rotated back just a little bit, but I'm pointing way more back this way. And like I said, John McEnroe can do it and Ben Sheldon can do it, but I don't have their timing, so for me, it doesn't work. The big thing is what's going on with this back leg. And then we'll see as he goes into his racket drop, we'll see that he's nicely side on there. How am I doing? I am also side on, or maybe no, I'm over rotating a little bit too much. And what I also want you to notice is that I don't get the racket tip pointing down as much. But this is, mostly going to be, maybe it's pointing down in that position there. So I'm slightly over rotated, and then it's partially a shoulder range of motion thing. You can see my arm and my head are at the same angle, whereas his head and his arm are at a different angle because he's got more external rotation in his shoulder. And yes, obviously the contact is different, but the big issue for me is that initial loading position. So now we'll look at Alcaraz, obviously another top player in the world, a lot younger than me, so we have to keep that in mind. He also uses a pinpoint stance, but there are certain things that we can definitely take from it and compare. So again, if we get into this position, we'll see his arm position compared to mine. Another example of, okay, is my arm pointing up a little bit too much? A lot of the pros tend to have it more, a slightly lower angle. And again, what we're going to see is the feet, the position of the chest. He is roughly pointing to the side as well, whereas you can see that I'm over rotated. And again, I have to look at this and go, if these top players aren't rotating back that far, it's definitely going to make the timing easier for me if I can reduce the level of rotation that's going on. Now we'll look at Djokovic, and again, the greatest player of all time. I'm obviously not going to be as good as Djokovic, but there are certain similarities that we're going to see with him and the other players. Number one, and the thing that I need to work on, what are happening with the feet? No external rotation of that hip, shoulder, chest, side on, maybe slightly more than side arm. And again, if we kind of look just before he loads up, so okay, maybe his angle isn't quite as steep. So if we go to mine, I'm still pointing up more than him. He's kind of somewhere in between the two, but still a little bit more range or room for external rotation than I've got. But the big thing that I'm taking away is, again, I need to change the loading position and not be rotating as far back each time. The last one that I want to look at is Ben Sheldon, because his is a little bit different. So as he loads, he does externally rotate his leg, but then he uses a pinpoint stance, so he steps in, and it still looks like his leg is externally rotated, but it's actually level with his pelvis. So in this position, my pelvis is pointing in one direction, my leg is even more externally rotated, which is why I can't drive effectively. His feet are pointing backwards, but his pelvis is also really pointing backwards, so he can still drive that hip forwards. If you also notice his kind of the angle of his pelvis and the angle of his chest, so he rotates much more than the other players, and that's why, or one of the reasons, he's able to get more power than most players. But what we have to factor in here is his level of timing and his level of athleticism compared to me. I'm not able to get the same sort of leg drive as a player like that, and I also don't currently have the timing in order to make it work, which is why I'm looking to try and change mine up and get my shoulders pointing more to the side and my pelvis at a slightly lesser angle, and then clean up what's going on with this foot, so hopefully I can get a better leg drive, which is then going to lead to a better racket drop and contact.